are finally back in the garage. Got a big wood project in it. Here's all the stuff from all of the Subarus that I took out before. You'll notice we got some boxes down here. Got some parts. Time to uncover our engine today, because we're gonna get some work done. We got timing belts, we got water pumps, we got tensioners. I got gaskets in here. I'm probably gonna have to run to a parts store and grab stuff like an intake manifold gasket and maybe a couple of seals, stuffy. I don't know yet. We'll see how it goes. We're gonna get this thing rebuilt and ready for her Subaru. We're ready. It's about time. It's been such a long summer. First step is, what I gotta do is just get this crank pulley off. I have a battery operated impact, makes it real easy. If you don't have one of these, I would recommend getting this starter bolt loose or this crankshaft bolt loose inside the car. You can watch another video that I have where I do a timing belt while it's inside the car. I'll link it up in the corner of the screen for you. This actually, believe it or not, came off pretty easy. Sometimes you gotta tap them with a hammer. Honestly, with it out of the vehicle, it's just way easier to get some hands on there and just rock it back and forth till it comes off. You wanna kind of be careful with this. You can see there's a keyway in here, and I'll expose more of this once I get all of these 10mm bolts out. We got that front cover off. Let's see, I don't know, it's like 10, 12 bolts holding it in. Here's your timing system. This would be your passenger side head. This would be your driver's side head. Here's the belt. All right, here is the water pump, an idler pulley right here, an idler pulley right here, and then right here is your belt tensioner. What we are gonna do is we're gonna rotate this around. You can see I put the crank bolt back in. So we're gonna rotate this engine around until our marks on top dead center. Now this thing doesn't necessarily have top dead center marks, but you can see kind of right there where that comes along. And then this side right here has a mark. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna roll it around until that's on the mark. And I'm gonna note where that's at. And if I have any kind of questions, I'll even mark that block. And then once that's done, once I rotate this around and I know the marks are all lined up, we'll take this bolt out and I'll remove this tensioner from the block. And that should allow me to get this belt out of here. Let's rotate this around. It's not far from TDC, so. Now, of course, in order to make sure that it is on top dead center, one, I should be looking at this and not just relying on a camera. That right there is pretty close. You can see that there's a mark right there on the crankshaft. It's lined up pretty much straight up and down here. Now what I might do is I'm gonna take probably a marker. I'm gonna mark where that's at right on the block. And actually I don't have to because there's a notch right there. So that's lined up perfectly. And this is lined up pretty much right where I told you it would line up, right with that crack in the block. Now that I have my timing marks all lined up, I'm gonna go ahead and take this bolt out and we'll get this old belt off of here and we'll start replacing it. We had to go to the store to get some tarps and some new pans because we are gonna be making a mess here. I have to take off this water pump. I was showing you a little bit else of what we got. Let's open some of these. Okay, so behind door number 1, I have a new oil pan. So I'm gonna be putting that on. See, this guy's a little, not much of a leak, but I still want to get a new fresh seal on here. Oil pan gasket. Next we have a valve cover gaskets. So we got timing sets. We got new valve cover gaskets. We got fairly new spark plugs, new spark plug wires, new front crankshaft seal. Let me show you what I just went and got from O'Reilly. In here, I have a bag that doesn't want to open. I got an oil filter. I have a front crankshaft seal. I have a rear crankshaft seal, and I have a pair of intake manifold gaskets because I have to pull this intake manifold off so that I can attach the transmission. Anyway, yep. So I got a lot of work to do, so let's get busy. I'm gonna start by just taking off these 10mm bolts, get this off, this idler pulley, and then we're gonna take this water pump off. Okay, we're getting down here. Got the front crankshaft pulley off. A little keyway in here that I used a pair of vice grips to pull out. It's very small. That comes out. Timing gear comes off of there. I have this seal puller in here. It's pretty simple. I just tapped on the back of that with a hammer. You can see where it's gouged a little bit there, so we're just going to work that in a little bit more and pull that out. I got a new seal for that, so we're going to get that in there, and we'll start the reassembly process. This is the oil we bought for the car, just some synthetic oil. Here's the new seal. It's got a little spring in there, and that's what keeps the tension on the crankshaft as it spins. So it's very imperative that you don't mess up, see where my thumb is? You don't want to mess up any of that. And you also don't want to score the edges or dent or ding this any. So we're going to coat this in a lot of oil, and then I'm going to take a socket about the same size and we're going to tap it in there nice and easy. There we go. New seal is in, nice and tight, no dents anywhere, and it's all nice and flush with the block. This right here is actually an oil pump. Grab a scraper, we're gonna clean this up a little bit. I'm gonna get the water pump back on there, and then I'm gonna start putting on new pulleys, and we're gonna run the new belt and get that all done. I put a little bit of gasket sealer on there. I use gray gasket sealant because it's sensor safe. Not that there's any sensors in here, but still, you want something that's not gonna goop up in a water system, and gray silicone is really good. I let it sit on its end so that the gasket's stuck, because getting this in here is a little bit of a pain. You can see that the timing cover for this side is kind of in the way. And it comes out okay, but it does not like going back in there right. So it goes in here like so. I don't know if you can see, but there's a groove on that side that it goes in, and then it sits flush right there. So I gotta fight with it, get it in, and get some bolts in it. Mission accomplished. We got the new water pump going in. I started with a bolt down here and a bolt up here. Just gotta take it really easy. You gotta make sure that you don't pinch that gasket that's behind there. Again, that's why I kind of let it sit and let that gasket cure on there for a little bit so it wasn't just sliding around so much. And then you just get this in here. A couple of main bolts that we have. There's another one right there. Got a 10 mil. Most of the bolts on here are either 14 or 10 on the front or somewhere. I think I've said on a previous video that you can almost take this whole car apart with like 3 different wrenches. So I'm gonna get all these tight by hand, and I'm gonna look up the torque specs and we'll torque them down. So I kept all these pulleys separate so I would know where they would go. This one's pretty self-explanatory because it's ribbed, but this one right here and this pulley right here are actually 2 different pulleys. And you know, because this one has actually a lip on it that you can see, and this one doesn't. So when I pull everything apart, I just separate it so I know what goes where, so when I'm putting it back together, I don't get confused. You don't want to put these pulleys back in the wrong place. So there's a cotter pin right there, you can see. I got it in, just tapped it a little bit, and then I just grabbed that little chunk of wood there. So I could use it kind of like a dead blow and hammered that in. So now I should be able to grab this guy. It only goes on one way because you can see it's grooved for the keyway. That's what it's called. And so when you go to put this on, you'll see it just kind of fits over that keyway, and it might be a little tight because we had that keyway off. So I'm gonna grab that wood and I'm gonna tap that back so it all sits on there nice and flush. And there we are, we're all back together. So I have the front crankshaft pulley. You can see I'm still lined up with my mark there. Still lined up with my mark there, and I'm still lined up with my mark there. This turns pretty easy, you can see. This I have to turn with a bolt if I want to turn it, and same with that, I gotta get a 14mm wrench and put that on there. I didn't replace the camshaft seals. You can kind of see them back there. They're not leaking. There's no oil down here anywhere on the bottom of this engine. I'm gonna let them ride just because these things are kind of hard to pull off. I try and leave these things loosey-goosey on here while I'm putting this belt on, because trust me, this thing is not easy. I got this one tightened, but this is fine. Double check with the belt routing. I'll put that up on screen right now so you guys have an idea. Basically, this thing kind of just wraps around here and connects. I don't have the tensioner in here yet. It's usually the last thing I put in because these belts are usually really tight, and this part is not fun at all. Ta-da! Sort of. I got it on. Let me give you guys some tips and some pointers. Obviously, I only have so many hands, and can't really record this while I'm doing it, and plus it's just one extra step that I have to focus on instead of doing the timing belt. It's really hard. There are some timing belt tools that you can get that will hold everything in place a lot better than what I'm doing. I'm just using a pair of vice grips lightly gripped onto the pulley here, and that's just to hold this belt on so it's not sliding. It just basically gives me a third hand. It's holding the belt right here. While I loop it around from this side, I start coming around here, get it pulled as tight as I can down here. Now the trick with this pulley is that you're going to rotate it counterclockwise until this mark is about, I don't know, 2-3 degrees off that way, like over here. And then you're going to put the belt on here, and then you're going to rotate it around until the timing marks line up. And when you do that, you're basically removing all of the slack out of the bottom of this belt. You're just pulling it through and getting as tight as possible here. You'll notice that I don't have anything bolted in here all the way yet, except for this. And on the water pump, obviously, I have these two guys loose. And I pulled this almost all the way off so that this gear was at the very edge of the crankshaft, so it's like forward. You're just gonna barely be able to get this over the edge of this. It's gonna be very tight. You don't wanna use a screwdriver or anything to pry because you're gonna damage your belt. It's supposed to be really tight. You just have to have patience. And once you get it right, you'll get the bottom to slide on here. And then you can see I've already started to push this back, and we're just gonna keep working this belt on here. These are all tight now. They're under, look up the torque specifications. I'll put it up on the screen for you. You want to make sure you don't over tighten these because it is aluminum threads in here, and if you strip one of these bolts out, you're going to have a very bad day. I got this pushed all the way back. I got the tensioner tightened now too. Very last thing that you want to do. I don't know if you can see that pin right there, this guy right here. So this is a pull pin. This is like a grenade in a lot of ways. As soon as I pull this pin, it's gonna release the tension that's holding this, and this thing is gonna shoot down into the belt, and it's gonna start putting tension on it. You can see this belt is actually pretty tight in here right now, but when I pull that pin, it's gonna put the final tension on it. And then after I put the tension on it, I'm gonna spin this around twice just to make sure everything lines up and to get the belts back on all the way. Before I pull this pin, a couple of things. Once you pull this pin, the cat's out of the bag, and getting this thing back together is gonna require a shot vise. Doable, but it's a big kind of a pain in the butt. So if you don't have access to a shot vise, or you're working with limited space or tools, I highly suggest not pulling this pin till you are absolutely 200% sure that this is all on here right. Now I have this on. You can see here's my timing mark right there lined up. You can see the timing line on the crankshaft is lined up. My timing mark right there is all lined up. So we're all lined up here. I also have, if you notice, the belt is flush on all these pulleys. You don't want this bolt hanging off of any of these pulleys. You want it nice and flush. I think we're ready to pull this pin. Wish me luck. Close to a second. I want to pull. And there we go. So I'm gonna let that sit for a second, and then I'm gonna put the bolt back in the front crankshaft, and we're gonna spin this around and make sure everything's lining up. Back at it today with this engine. I have a timing belt in here. We're gonna pull the valve covers off this thing real quick. I'm gonna put new spark plugs in it. Oh yeah, oil pan. I gotta put an oil pan in it. So let's do all that right now. One of the things I really like about these engine stands is you can rotate them over. So when you're working on a Subaru, that makes it really nice because this is the passenger side, and all the way down there is the driver's side. So I can rotate this over, put this right on top, and make it really easy to work on. Here's our valve train. I've never really looked in here before, but it looks like everything's okay. I don't see any kind of like gross sludge buildup anywhere. Everything looks really clean in here. So we're gonna go ahead and pull these grommets off and get a new gasket in here, get it all sealed up. Here's a new Velcro gasket kit. Pretty simple. We have these grommets, which they replaced these guys. So these are the old ones. They get kind of like plasticky and hard. They don't really work anymore. It's down there, and these things just slide nice and easy over the top. And when the valve cover comes back down on it, they make a nice tight seal so that oil doesn't get down in here where these plugs live. So that's good. Next we're just going to take this guy out of here. Again, this will be, this looks like it was done recently, so that's not the worst I've ever seen in my life for a gasket, huh? It's not bad, so that's good. That's a good sign. Let me get a new gasket on here. We're gonna throw this back together and I'll get better with you. You guys see these things? They just peel off with a screwdriver. Sometimes they fall off, but basically they're just like little crush washers that prevent you from over tightening the bolts on here. So you just want to pull them off. I'm just gonna take new ones, just place them on there loosely. But when you tighten down the bolt, it won't get pulled down into those holes. And they kind of just crush into place. And make it so that, oh, I forgot one. There's one right there that I forgot. But I'll get these four started. I'll pull that off. We'll tighten it all down, and then we'll pull the plugs out and replace them with the newer ones that I have. I've got all these tightened and torqued back down. There's a torque setting on these. Again, I've been doing this for a long time. These crush washers make it so you can't really, I mean, you can over tighten them, you can over crush these things, and it's bad. But when these things stop, you just give it like maybe an eighth more of a turn. Just snug them down. They're nice and tight. So now we're gonna pull the plugs out. Already got these loose. Not my glove. You can see these actually are fairly new plugs, NGKs. They're pretty good. I don't know, I don't think I did a tune-up on this, but a tune-up has been done recently on this because these plugs are really good. So we're gonna go ahead and put these back in here. I have 4 newer plugs that we had bought for Audrey's car. I took it apart before I realized that the engine was blown. So I have 4 newish plugs. They've only been in for maybe 20 minutes inside of an engine. If that's good, but I don't need them. We're gonna tighten these back in here and we're gonna jump to the other side and do that. Got everything disconnected. I already did the valve covers on both sides. I got this motor flipped over, got all the oil drained out of it. And now we're gonna try and get this oil pan off. Yeah, right. I'm gonna probably have to come with a scraper and a hammer and start prying to get this thing up. Yeehaw! I won. Here's the inside of a Subaru engine. It's pretty much all plated and covered. This block actually separates into 2 pieces. It's pretty complex. Not like really bad, but you can see some oil residue here. I had to pull the dipstick out of the pan. It was kind of a pain in the butt. I'm gonna grab a scraper right now. Let's see if I can find something. Oh, scrapey! I was using it the other day, which means I'm never going to be able to find it again. Okay, I spent about 45 minutes to an hour on this. It is not perfect. There's a kind of a mess down here. There's some orange goober slob on there. I got it off as good as I can. I'm going to shake that out. We're going to re-silicone and put a new gasket down, and I can be done for the day. And there you have it. That's pretty much everything I did to the engine for our Subaru Forester. If you guys remember, I had a donor car that we completely pulled apart, and I was able to utilize all the spare stuff, including this whole engine, for Audrey's car, which we blew an engine for earlier this year. Doing all this is gonna definitely add to the longevity, and again, this car's got a lot of sentimental value, and Audrey's had it for a long time, so we're hoping to keep it with us for a while, and this engine is really gonna help. We got pretty much all new gaskets and a new timing belt, and everything I could think of I really did, including I just went out and bought new radiator hoses for it today and a new bypass hoses, and we're going to put brand new thermostats in it. So stay tuned for the next video coming out, because it will be me putting that thing back together, and I'm really excited because this car hasn't run all summer, so to get it back on the road again is going to be pretty huge for us. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you've gotten this far, can you just do us a favor and like and just give us a subscribe? We post 2 videos a week, and that kind of stuff really helps a growing channel like us. We're trying to get to 50 likes in a video. If you could do that, that would really help us. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. Bye. Whoop. I'm not putting that in there. That's dumb.